If you need to replace any of the bands on your machine other than the main drive band, you're going to need your 2.5mm hex driver and do some basic disassembly. Obviously, first thing to do is go ahead and take that off and set that aside. And then we screw down the indicator knob until the axle bracket is firmly held down all the way. This will help things to keep from just popping out because of that spring. So we go ahead and take out these guys. One screw for the clamp on each side of the axle bracket. Then we go ahead and remove those clamps and set those aside. And then we undo the knob until the bracket loosens. Basically, we want this band here between the spindle and the idler pulley to loosen up. So we can move that forward. The axle bracket pivot bolt will come loose. That's okay, that's what we want. And we just go ahead and keep undoing that. And basically, once this band, if this band is still there, once it's loose, we can go ahead and take the clamps off of the spindle pulley. Two screws on each side. Oop. And set those aside. Feel free to fast forward through this part if you haven't already. All right. Okay. Set all those clamps aside. Now this whole thing will come out as soon as we take the knob completely off. There we go. Now those come completely out and we can start changing bands. I'll just set the base aside. So assuming this band is still intact, just go ahead and roll that over the sanding barrel on that side. You take that out. And at this point, we're assuming we're going to replace both bands, the one that goes around the car axle, as well as the one that goes to the spindle. But if this is still in place and you only need to replace this band, then what I do is go ahead and loop that out of the way at the back. And then we take the nut off the end of the bolt, take the bolt out, and then this whole pulley will just come out. So let's say that band was broken and we're replacing it. We put it around the pulley, put the pulley back in place, put the bolt back through, and the nut on the end, and then proceed to reassemble, which we'll do in a minute. But we're going to pretend that the other band is also broken. We're going to pretend that this band is broken, so it's not there. Or let's pretend that it's worn, and we don't want to wait until it breaks while we're chewing tires. So you go ahead and take at least one screw out of this stabilizer bar until the axle bracket will spread apart. There we go. Just barely, not all the way out. You can also remove the other one if you want to make this easier. But basically, at this point, we need to get this worn out band off. So we go ahead and just gently spread the axle brackets apart and pull that through the gap. All right, don't put a whole lot of pressure on this, just enough to get the band through there. And to put a new band on, we go ahead and do the same thing in reverse. Just enough to get that band through there, and to make it easier to pull through there, go ahead and loop it around and just pull that through. Like I said, you can take off the other screw and take that stabilizer bar completely out to make that easier, so you're not having to spread those apart. But once you get the new band through the stabilizer bar, Go ahead and hook it around the back end, the paddle end of the axle bracket, and tighten this screw again. So we drive that all the way back in. You can go pretty snug on this, but don't go ham on it because it's just into plastic. All right. And then we replace the idler and the band. So this band wore out or broke. So now we put that band on the idler pulley, put it in there in between. And by having this band around here, it's going to be going around the idler pulley. So we line up the pulley in the hole in the axle bracket, get that bolt all the way through. Go ahead and put the nut on the end. Just a few turns, not super tight, because you're going to have to back that out a bunch. Okay. And what I like to do is go ahead and just hook that other one around one of the axle forks so that it's out of the way when we put the machine back together. And now with two fresh bands on there, we can go ahead and put the pulley back in, or the sanding spindle back in. Just like before, just roll it over the sanding barrel. And we're going to do pretty much everything in reverse. So we just put the axle bracket on the bolt. Don't worry about screwing that down. And then we put the spindle clamps back on. These can go on either side. They're exact copies of each other. So you don't need to worry about mixing up which side these go on. And to turn these most of the way, but don't go tight, or don't even go snug, but basically get these both started so you can turn them down evenly. And once you start to feel resistance, stop. And then do the other side, same thing. Turn it until you feel resistance, and then stop. Because if you've used the tramming screw to raise this side, then if you go really tight on those screws, you might push it down. Same with the other side. Put the clamp back on and screw those screws in evenly. But not tight until you get the other one started. And like I said, until it gets snug, and then stop. Don't go ham on those. Okay, and then we do the indicator knob on the bolt, and we go ahead and start screwing that down. While we're doing that, we want to make sure the bolt and nut line up with the little hexagonal holes in the clamps. You might need to back off this nut a little bit to make it fit, because the bolt needs to fit snugly, but not super tight, but not loose. Okay, so basically we're going to move this bolt into place while we screw down the indicator knob. And you can just push it down if you want to test the bolt fitment. Looks like I need to loosen that a little bit. And push it down in there. That feels pretty good. But it's going to be hard to clamp that in place while it's trying to be pushed up. So that's why we go ahead and tighten this all the way back down, so that the axle bracket isn't trying to jump out while we're trying to clamp it down. Okay, got that mostly down. Bolt and nut are nicely in place. We make sure we're using the correct clamp. The hexagonal opening facing outward on each side. And then our short screws. Make sure you don't cross thread them, so back it off until you feel or hear the little click of the threads. And then screw it in. And you can do these snug, but you don't have to go super crazy. Alright, and then go ahead and put that final main drive band on. Loop it over the big pulley first, then stretch it out and snap it over the little pulley. and then we're good to go. I usually hang this off the side so that when I put the the axle in, then I just pull it over the wheel and the axle and put it on the split pulley. So we're basically done. New pulleys, or new rubber bands all around.